What if I told you that a teenage captive in ancient Babylon would become the most powerful prophet in history? That he would stand before kings who could execute him with a single word, interpret dreams that baffled the world's greatest minds, survive a night with hungry lions, and receive visions so precise they would predict the rise and fall of empires centuries before they happened? The Book of Daniel isn't just another biblical story, it's a cosmic thriller where heaven and earth collide. Picture this: a young man torn from his homeland, thrown into a pagan empire, forced to serve gods he doesn't believe in. Yet instead of breaking, he becomes the one person every king desperately needs. From forgotten dreams that haunt the night to mysterious hands writing doom on palace walls. From fiery furnaces that refuse to burn to lions that become lambs. This is where faith meets the impossible. But here's what makes Daniel truly extraordinary. His visions didn't just speak to his time, they mapped out our future with terrifying accuracy. Ready to see the Book of Daniel like never before? Let's dive in. The year was 605 BC, and Jerusalem was about to fall. The Book of Daniel opens with these sobering words found in chapter 1, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. This wasn't just another military conquest. This was God's judgment on a nation that had turned away from him. Verse 2 tells us what happened next. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he carried them into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. The sacred items from God's temple were now sitting in a pagan temple in Babylon. For any Jew witnessing this, it would have felt like the end of everything. But Nebuchadnezzar had a plan that went beyond just taking treasures. Chapter 1, verse 3 reveals his strategy. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility. These weren't random captives. They were the future leaders of Judah. The requirements were very specific. Verse 4 lays them out: youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Nebuchadnezzar wanted young men who were physically perfect, mentally sharp, and capable of learning a completely new culture. Among these selected young men were 4 who would change history: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The Babylonian system immediately tried to erase their identities. Verse 7 of chapter 1 shows us how. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar, Hananiah he called Shadrach, Mishael he called Meshach, and Azariah he called Abednego. Their Hebrew names, which honored the God of Israel, were replaced with names honoring Babylonian gods. Daniel, meaning God is my judge, became Belteshazzar, meaning Bel, protect his life. But changing their names was just the beginning. The king had a special plan for these young men. Verse 5 tells us, the king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate, and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Royal food, royal wine, a 3-year education in the finest palace in the world. Most captives would have jumped at this opportunity. But Daniel saw something others might have missed. Verse 8 says, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food, or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. The word resolved is powerful here. This wasn't a casual decision. Daniel made up his mind. The royal food was likely offered to idols first, and the dietary laws God gave to Israel were clear. Think about Daniel's position. He's a teenager, far from home, living under the control of the most powerful empire on earth. One wrong move could mean death, yet here he is, politely but firmly refusing the king's food. He didn't make a big scene, he simply asked permission to follow his conscience. That takes incredible courage. Here's where something beautiful happens. Verse 9 of chapter 1 reveals, "And God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs." Notice it doesn't say Daniel's charm won him over. God gave him favor. When we stand for what's right, God often opens doors we couldn't open ourselves, but the chief eunuch was still afraid. Verse 10 captures his concern, "And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink. For why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king." This man could lose his life if these young men looked unhealthy. Daniel had a solution. He spoke to the steward, and verse 12 records his proposal. "Test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink." Then as verse 13 continues, "Then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Let the results speak for themselves." The steward agreed, and verse 14 confirms, "So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. Those 10 days must have felt long, but they trusted God with the outcome." Verse 15 tells us the result. At the end of 10 days it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. They didn't just look as good, they looked better. So verse 16 says, "So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables." But God's blessing went beyond physical health. Verse 17 reveals something extraordinary. As for these 4 youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. God gave them supernatural ability, and Daniel received an additional gift, the ability to understand visions and dreams. When their 3 years ended, verse 18 tells us, "At the end of the time, when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar." Verse 19 describes what happened. "And the king spoke with them, and among all of them none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king." The real surprise comes in verse 20. "And in every matter of wisdom and understanding, about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom." 10 times better. These young men who ate vegetables outperformed the most educated minds in Babylon. Time passed. Chapter 2, verse 1 sets the scene. "In the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him." The most powerful man in the world was losing sleep over a dream, but he couldn't remember what he had dreamed. Verse 2 says, "Then the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. These were the wise men of Babylon. They expected the usual request: interpret this dream. But Nebuchadnezzar had something else in mind. Verse 3 records his demand. "And the king said to them, I had a dream, and my spirit is troubled to know the dream." The Chaldeans responded in verse 4. "Then the Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation." That was normal procedure. But verse 5 contains his stunning reply. "The king answered and said to the Chaldeans, The word from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. Tell me both the dream and its meaning, or die." He also offered a reward. Verse 6 continues, "But if you show the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and its interpretation." The wise men tried again in verse 7. They answered a second time and said, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show its interpretation." Verse 8 shows his anger rising. The king answered and said, I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see that the word from me is firm. Then verse 9, if you do not make the dream known to me, there is but one sentence for you. You have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the times change. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me its interpretation. The wise men had to admit the truth. Verses 10 and 11 record their response. The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can meet the king's demand, for no great and powerful king has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king asks is difficult, and no one can show it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. What you're asking is impossible. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction was brutal. Verse 12 of chapter 2 tells us, because of this the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed, not just the ones in the room, all of them. Verse 13 confirms, so the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. Daniel knew nothing about this until the executioners showed up. When Arioch came to kill him, verse 14 says, then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Daniel didn't panic. He asked a question, which verse 15 records. He declared to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel. Once Daniel understood, he did something bold. Verse 16 says, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. Daniel promised to do what every wise man said was impossible. Daniel knew where to turn. Verse 17 tells us, then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. Verse 18 reveals what they did, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. They prayed. That night God answered. Verse 19 says, then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. God showed Daniel everything. But notice Daniel's response. Before running to the king, he blessed God. Verses 20 through 23 record his prayer. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you, for you have made known to us the king's matter. Armed with this revelation, verse 24 tells us, therefore Daniel went into Arioch, whom the king had appointed to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus to him, do not destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Arioch wasted no time. Verse 25 says, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus to him, I have found among the exiles from Judah a man who will make known to the king the interpretation. The king asked him in verse 26, the king declared to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to make known to me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? Daniel's answer in verses 27 and 28 shows his character. Daniel answered the king and said, no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king has asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will be in the latter days. Before revealing anything, Daniel pointed to God. Then Daniel began describing the dream. Verse 31 starts, you saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. Verse 32 continues, "The head of this image was of fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze." Verse 33 adds, "Its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay." Then verse 34, "As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay, and broke them in pieces." Verse 35, "Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold all together were broken in pieces, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." Now came the interpretation. Verse 36 says, "This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation." Verses 37 and 38 explain, "You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory, and into whose hand he has given wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold." But it wouldn't last forever. Verse 39, "Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth." Then verse 40, "And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks to pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these. This fourth kingdom had weakness." Verses 41 and 42, "And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle." Verse 43, "As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay." Then comes the climax. Verse 44, "And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever." Verse 45 concludes, "Just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure." Nebuchadnezzar's response was immediate. Verse 46 of chapter 2 says, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and paid homage to Daniel, and commanded that an offering and incense be offered up to him." Verse 47, "The king answered and said to Daniel, 'Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery.'" On to verse 48, "Then the king gave Daniel high honors and many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon." Verse 49, "Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained at the king's court." But something troubling was brewing. Chapter 3 opens with verse 1. "King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. The king built an entire statue of gold, 90 feet tall. It was as if he was saying, 'My kingdom won't end.'" Verse 2. "Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up." Verse 3. Then the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces gathered for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the herald made an announcement. Verses 4 and 5. And the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." Verse 6. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace, bow or burn. Verse 7. Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Everyone bowed, almost everyone. Some Chaldeans saw an opportunity. Verse 8 of chapter 3 says, "Therefore at that time certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews." Verse 9, "They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, 'O king, live forever.'" Verses 10 through 12, "You, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast into a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was furious. Verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Verse 14. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up?" Verse 15. Now if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? The three men's answer in verses 16 through 18 is powerful. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Even if God doesn't save us, we still won't bow." Verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expression of his face was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was usually heated. Verse 20. And he ordered some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Verse 21. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, their hats, and their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Verse 22. Because the king's order was urgent, and the furnace overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But then something impossible happened. Verse 24. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." Verse 25. He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. Verse 27. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Some time had passed since the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. Chapter 4, verse 4 sets the scene. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and prospering in my palace. The king was comfortable, successful, everything was going well. But then verse 5 tells us what happened. I saw a dream that made me afraid. As I lay in bed, the fancies and the visions of my head alarmed me. This dream terrified him. So verse 6 says, "So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream." He called all his advisors. Verse 7 continues, "Then the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation." Once again, the wise men of Babylon were useless. Finally, Daniel came in. Verse 8 describes the moment. "At last Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belteshazzar after the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream." The king then described what he saw. Verse 10 begins, "The visions of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great." Verse 11 continues the description. "The tree grew and became strong, and its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth." This wasn't just any tree. It was massive, towering into the sky where everyone could see it. Verse 12 adds more detail. "Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it." The tree provided everything: food, shade, shelter. Every creature benefited from it. But then something changed. Verses 13 and 14 describe what happened next. "I saw in the visions of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said thus, 'Chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts flee from under it and the birds from its branches.' Night, a heavenly messenger commanded the tree's destruction, but verse 15 shows there was more. 'But leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth.'" Notice the shift from it to him. This tree represented a person. Verse 16 makes this even clearer. "Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast's mind be given to him. And let 7 periods of time pass over him. For 7 years this person would live like an animal." Verse 17 explains the purpose. "The sentence is by the decree of the watchers, the decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will and sets over it the lowliest of men." Or verse 18 records the king's request. "This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, saw, and you, O Belteshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you." Daniel's reaction was immediate and telling. Verse 19 of chapter 4 describes it. "Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, 'Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar answered and said, "My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you and its interpretation for your enemies." Daniel was so troubled that he stood silent for a moment. He didn't want to deliver this message. He even wished the dream applied to the king's enemies instead. But he had to tell the truth. Verse 20 begins the interpretation. "The tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reached to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth." Verse 21 continues, "Whose leaves were beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which beasts of the field found shade, and in whose branches the birds of the heavens lived." Then verse 22 delivers the point, "It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominion to the ends of the earth." The tree was Nebuchadnezzar himself. His kingdom had spread everywhere. Everyone lived under his rule. But Daniel had to explain the rest of the dream. Verse 23 continues, "And because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, 'Chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field, and let him be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 periods of time pass over him.'" Now came the hard part. Verse 24 gives the interpretation. "This is the interpretation, O king. It is a decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king." This wasn't Daniel's opinion. This was God's judgment. Verse 25 spells it out, "That you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven. And 7 periods of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will." The mighty king would lose his mind and live like an animal in the fields, but there was hope. Verse 26 adds, "And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that heaven rules." The kingdom would be waiting for him when he returned to his senses. Then Daniel did something remarkable. He gave the king advice. Verse 27 records his plea, "Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your prosperity." Daniel urged the king to change his ways. Maybe God would delay the judgment if Nebuchadnezzar humbled himself and showed mercy. For a while, nothing happened. Verse 28 tells us, "All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar." But verse 29 shows it didn't happen immediately. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. A whole year passed, 12 months of prosperity. Maybe the king thought the danger had passed. Maybe he forgot about Daniel's warning. Then the king made a fatal mistake. Verse 30 records his words, "And the king answered and said, 'Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?'" Standing on his palace roof, surveying his magnificent city, Nebuchadnezzar took credit for everything. He forgot who had given him his power. The judgment fell instantly. Verse 31 says, "While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, 'O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you.'" Before he even finished speaking, heaven responded. Verse 32 continues the pronouncement, "And you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 periods of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will." It happened immediately. Verse 33 describes the transformation. Immediately the word was fulfilled against Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and ate grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew as long as eagle's feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. The most powerful man on earth was now crawling in the fields, eating grass, sleeping in the dew. His hair grew wild and matted. His nails became like claws. For 7 years, he lived this way. Then the 7 years ended. Verse 34 of chapter 4 tells us what happened. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. The moment Nebuchadnezzar looked up to heaven and acknowledged God, his sanity returned. Verse 35 continues his declaration. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does, according to his will, among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" The king finally understood. God is sovereign, humans are nothing compared to him. No one can question God's actions. Verse 36 describes his restoration. At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. His officials found him and brought him back to the palace. He was restored to his throne, and his kingdom became even greater than before. Verse 37 gives us his final testimony. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. The proudest king on earth learned the hardest way possible, that God humbles the proud. Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar died, and eventually his grandson Belshazzar became king. Chapter 5, verse 1, introduces a new scene. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. This wasn't a small dinner party. This was a massive celebration with 1,000 nobles, but Belshazzar made a terrible decision. Verse 2 tells us, Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Remember those sacred vessels from God's temple that Nebuchadnezzar had taken? Belshazzar decided to use them as party cups. Verse 3 describes what happened. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives and his concubines drank from them. They were drinking and partying using items dedicated to God, but it got worse. Verse 4 adds, they drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood and stone. While drinking from God's sacred cups, they worshipped idols. They were mocking the God of Israel at their drunken party. It was an act of supreme arrogance and disrespect. What happened next was terrifying. Suddenly, in the middle of the celebration, something impossible appeared. Verse 5 of chapter 5 describes the moment. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand, and the king saw the hand as it wrote. A hand with no body appeared and began writing on the wall. Everyone could see it. The king's reaction was pure terror. Verse 6 says, then the king's color changed and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. His face went pale, his legs buckled. He was shaking with fear. Verse 7 records his desperate response. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. The king declared to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. He offered incredible rewards, royal clothing, a gold chain, and the position of third highest ruler in the kingdom. Verse 8 tells us what happened. Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Once again, the Babylonian wise men failed completely. They couldn't even read the words, let alone interpret them. Verse 9 describes the chaos. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. The king was panicking, and his officials had no idea what to do. But someone remembered Daniel. The queen, likely the queen mother who remembered Nebuchadnezzar's time, came in. Verse 10 says, "The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, 'O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change.'" She reminded him about Daniel. Verses 11 and 12 record her words, "There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. In the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom like the wisdom of the gods were found in him. And King Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, enchanters, Chaldeans, and astrologers, because an excellent spirit, knowledge and understanding to interpret dreams, explain riddles and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation." Daniel was brought in. Verse 13 records the king's question. "Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, 'You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah.'" Verse 14 continues, "I have heard of you, that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you." The king explained the situation. Verse 15, "Now the wise men, the enchanters, have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not show the interpretation of the matter." Then verse 16, "But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Daniel's response was bold. Verse 17 records it. "Then Daniel answered and said before the king, 'Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation.'" Daniel didn't want the rewards. He would interpret the writing because it was the truth that needed to be told. Before interpreting, Daniel gave Belshazzar a history lesson. Verses 18 through 21 remind him of Nebuchadnezzar's story. "O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship and greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he killed, and whom he would he kept alive. Whom he would he raised up, and whom he would he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of a beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will." Then Daniel confronted Belshazzar directly. Verse 22 says, "And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. You knew what happened to your grandfather, yet you didn't learn." Verse 23 continues the accusation. "But you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven, and the vessels of his house have been brought in before you, and you and your lords, your wives, and your concubines have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, of bronze, iron, wood, and stone, which do not see or hear or know, but the God in whose hand is your breath, and whose are all your ways, you have not honored. You use God's sacred vessels to worship idols. You dishonored the God who gives you every breath." Verse 24 explains why the hand appeared. "Then from his presence the hand was sent, and this writing was inscribed." Now Daniel read the words. Verse 25. And this is the writing that was inscribed, Mene, Mene, Tekel, and Parsin. 4 words. Daniel explained each one. Verse 26. This is the interpretation of the matter. Mene, God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Your time is up. Verse 27. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. God has judged you and found you lacking. Verse 28. Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Tonight, your empire ends. Verse 29 tells us Belshazzar kept his promise. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the 3rd ruler in the kingdom. But verse 30 reveals the swift judgment. That very night, Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, was killed. Before dawn, the king was dead. Verse 31 of chapter 5 concludes, And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. A new empire had taken over. Under the new Persian administration, Daniel continued to serve. Chapter 6, verse 1 tells us, It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be throughout the whole kingdom. The new king organized his empire with many officials. Verse 2 continues, And over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Daniel was one of the top 3 officials in the entire empire, but he stood out even among them. Verse 3 says, Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Daniel's exceptional character and ability made the king want to promote him above everyone else. This created serious jealousy. The other officials wanted to bring Daniel down. Verse 4 describes their plan. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful, and no error or fault was found in him. They investigated everything Daniel did, looking for corruption, mistakes, anything they could use against him, but they found nothing. Daniel was completely faithful, so they changed their strategy. Verse 5 records their conclusion. Then these men said, We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. The only way to trap Daniel was to use his faith against him. They knew he would never compromise his devotion to God. They came up with a scheme. Verses 6 and 7 describe their approach to the king. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Notice the lie. They said all the officials agreed, but Daniel certainly hadn't agreed to this. They were flattering the king, making him think everyone wanted to honor him. Verse 8 continues their request. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. They wanted it written into law so it couldn't be undone. Verse 9 tells us the king fell for it. Therefore King Darius signed the document and injunction. He had no idea this was a trap designed specifically to destroy Daniel. Daniel heard about the new law. Verse 10 of chapter 6 describes his response. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Daniel didn't hide. He didn't stop praying. He opened his windows and prayed toward Jerusalem exactly as he always had, 3 times a day. The officials were watching. Verse 11 says, "Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. They caught him in the act. They immediately went to the king." Verse 12 records their accusation. "Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, 'O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions?' The king answered and said, 'The thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked.' Then they sprang their trap." Verse 13, "Then they answered and said before the king, 'Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day.'" The king realized he'd been tricked. Verse 14 describes his distress. "Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. But the officials pressed him." Verse 15 says, "Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, 'Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed.'" The law couldn't be broken, even by the king himself. Darius had no choice. Verse 16 tells us, "Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, 'May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you.'" Even as he condemned Daniel, the king expressed hope that Daniel's God would save him. Verse 17 continues, "And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel." The king couldn't eat or sleep. Verse 18 says, "Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him." He was sick with worry about Daniel. At the first light of dawn, verse 19 tells us, "Then at break of day the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions." Verse 20 describes the moment. "As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, 'O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?'" The king's voice was full of grief and desperate hope. Then came Daniel's voice from inside the den. Verse 21 records his response. "Then Daniel said to the king, 'O king, live forever.'" Daniel was alive. Verse 22 explains how, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm." The king was overjoyed. Verse 23 says, "Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den." So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Not a scratch, not a bite. The lions hadn't touched him. The king immediately turned to the conspirators. Verse 24 records the judgment. "And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces." The lions were hungry. They just hadn't been allowed to touch Daniel. Verse 25 tells us King Darius made a proclamation. "Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, 'Peace be multiplied to you.'" Verse 26 continues his decree. "I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end." Verse 27 concludes the proclamation. "He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." Another pagan king acknowledged the power of Israel's God. We now move back in time to the first year of Belshazzar's reign, before the events of the lion's den. Daniel himself began receiving visions. Chapter 7 verse 1 introduces this. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel wasn't just interpreting other people's dreams anymore. God was giving him direct revelations. Verse 2 describes what he saw. Daniel declared, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea." The scene was chaotic, winds whipping up the sea. Then something emerged from the water. Verse 3 tells us, "And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another." The first beast appeared. Verse 4 describes it. "The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it." A lion with eagle's wings that eventually stood like a human and received a human mind. Then came the second beast. Verse 5 says, "And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, 'Arise, devour much flesh.' But this bear was lopsided, had ribs in its mouth, and was commanded to consume much." The third beast followed. Verse 6 describes it. "After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. A leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, swift and with multiple centers of power. Then came the most terrifying beast of all." Verse 7 gives us the description. "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This creature was unlike anything in nature. It was a monster that crushed and destroyed everything." Daniel focused on those horns. Verse 8 tells us what happened next. "I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. A small horn appeared, uprooted 3 others, and had human eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully." Then the vision shifted dramatically. Verse 9 of chapter 7 describes what Daniel saw next. "As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire." Daniel was witnessing a heavenly throne room. The Ancient of Days, God himself, sat in judgment. Verse 10 continues the scene. "A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Millions upon millions of heavenly beings surrounded the throne. The court was in session, and the books of judgment were opened." What happened to that boastful horn? Verse 11 tells us, "I looked then because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking. And as I looked, the beast was killed, and its body destroyed and given over to be burned with fire." The 4th beast and its arrogant horn were completely destroyed. Verse 12 adds, "As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. The other beasts lost their power, but weren't immediately destroyed. Then Daniel saw something glorious." Verse 13 describes it. "I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Someone who looked like a human being came with the clouds of heaven and approached God's throne." Verse 14 reveals what happened to this figure. "And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. This Son of Man received an eternal kingdom that would never end. Unlike the four beasts whose kingdoms would fall, his kingdom would last forever. Daniel was deeply troubled by what he'd seen. Verse 15 says, "As for me, Daniel, my spirit within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me." He needed to understand what all this meant. Verse 16 continues, "I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. The heavenly being explained the beasts." Verse 17 gives the basic interpretation. These four great beasts are four kings who shall arise out of the earth. Four kingdoms would rise from the earth, but verse 18 provides the ultimate outcome. "But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever, and ever." God's people would ultimately inherit an eternal kingdom. Daniel wanted to know more about the fourth beast. Verse 19 records his request, "Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet." This beast was different from all the others, and that concerned Daniel. Verse 20 continues his inquiry, "And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions." Daniel especially wanted to understand the little horn with the big mouth. He had seen something else about this horn. Verse 21 tells us, "As I looked, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them." This horn would fight against God's people and defeat them for a time. Verse 22 adds, "Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High, and the time came when the saints possessed the kingdom." But God would intervene, judge in favor of his people, and give them the kingdom. The heavenly being provided more details about the fourth beast. Verse 23 explains, "Thus he said, As for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth, and trample it down, and break it to pieces." This kingdom would be unique in its power and destructiveness. Verse 24 interprets the horns. "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings. 10 kings would come from this kingdom, then another would rise and overthrow 3 of them." Verse 25 describes this king's actions. "He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time." This ruler would blaspheme God, persecute his people, and try to change established times and laws. He would have power for 3.5 years, but his reign would end. Verse 26 says, "But the court shall sit in judgment, and his dominion shall be taken away, to be consumed and destroyed to the end." God's court would judge and completely destroy this ruler's power. Verse 27 gives the final outcome. "And the kingdom, and the dominion, and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him." God's people would receive all authority and power in an eternal kingdom. Verse 28 concludes, "Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts greatly alarmed me, and my color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart." Daniel was shaken by these visions, but he held on to what he'd seen. 2 years later, Daniel received another vision. Chapter 8, verse 1 tells us, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first." This was a follow-up to the previous vision. Verse 2 describes where Daniel was in the vision. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. Daniel found himself transported in the vision to a specific location in Persia. Then he saw something. Verse 3 says, I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. A ram with 2 unequal horns appeared. Verse 4 describes what this ram did. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before it, and there was no one who could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. This ram was unstoppable, conquering in all directions. While Daniel watched the ram, something new appeared. Verse 5 tells us, as I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a conspicuous horn between its eyes. A goat with a prominent horn came flying across the earth. This goat went straight for the ram. Verse 6 says, he came to the ram with the 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. The goat attacked with fury. Verse 7 continues, I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Mdil, the goat, completely destroyed the ram. Then verse 8 tells us what happened to the goat. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. At the height of its power the great horn broke, and 4 horns took its place, pointing in 4 different directions. Out of one of these 4 horns came something new. Verse 9 of chapter 8 describes it. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. A small horn emerged and expanded its power toward different regions, including the glorious land, Israel. Verse 10 shows how far this horn's arrogance went. It grew great, even to the host of heaven. And some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. This power reached up to heaven itself, casting down heavenly beings, but the worst was yet to come. Verse 11 tells us, it became great, even as great as the prince of the host, and the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. This horn exalted itself against God himself and stopped the daily sacrifices in God's temple. Verse 12 adds more detail, and a host will be given over to it together with the regular burnt offering because of transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground, and it will act and prosper. This power would succeed in its rebellion against truth for a time. Daniel heard heavenly beings discussing this. Verse 13 says, Then I heard a Holy One speaking, and another Holy One said to the one who spoke, For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and host to be trampled underfoot? One angel asked another how long this desolation would last. Verse 14 gives the answer, And he said to me, For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. Boom! After 2,300 days, the sanctuary would be cleansed. Daniel tried to understand what he'd seen. Verse 15 of chapter 8 tells us, When I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. Someone who looked human appeared before him. Then Daniel heard a voice. Verse 16 says, And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. The voice commanded Gabriel to explain the vision to Daniel. This is the first time an angel is named in the book of Daniel. Gabriel came near, and Daniel was terrified. Verse 17 describes the moment. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, Understand, O Son of Man, that the vision is for the time of the end. The angel told Daniel this vision was about the end times. The encounter was overwhelming. Verse 18 continues, And when he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and made me stand up. Daniel collapsed, and Gabriel had to lift him up. Gabriel began explaining the symbols. Verse 19 says, He said, Behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. Everything had an appointed time. The ram was easy to identify. Verse 20 tells us, As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. The two horns represented the two parts of the Medo-Persian Empire. The goat was equally clear. Verse 21 explains, And the goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between his eyes is the first king. The goat represented Greece, and the prominent horn was its first great king. What about the four horns? Verse 22 provides the answer. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which four others arose, 4 kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. After the first king, 4 kingdoms would emerge from his nation, though none would match his strength. Then Gabriel described the final king. Verse 23 says, And at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. A cunning, fierce king would appear. Verse 24 describes his power. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. He would wield supernatural power and destroy both powerful rulers and God's people. Verse 25 reveals his methods. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many. And he shall even rise up against the Prince of Princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. He would use deception, exalt himself, attack many, and even oppose God. But he would be destroyed supernaturally. Gabriel concluded with a command. Verse 26 says, The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. The vision was true, but concerned the distant future. The vision left Daniel exhausted. Verse 27 tells us, And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. Even after the explanation, Daniel remained troubled and didn't fully grasp everything. Years passed. We move to the first year of Darius the Mede. Chapter 9, verse 1 sets the time. In the first year of Darius the son of Ahasuerus, by descent, a Mede, who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. This was right after Babylon fell to Persia. Daniel was reading scripture. Verse 2 tells us, In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Daniel discovered in Jeremiah's prophecy that Jerusalem's exile would last 70 years. That time was almost complete. This discovery moved Daniel to prayer. Verse 3 describes his approach. Then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy, with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. He prayed with fasting and signs of mourning and repentance. Daniel's prayer began with worship. Verse 4 says, I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession, saying, O Lord, the great and awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. He acknowledged God's greatness and faithfulness. Then Daniel confessed sin. Verse 5 continues, "We have sinned and done wrong and acted wickedly and rebelled, turning aside from your commandments and rules." Notice Daniel included himself in the confession, even though he personally had been faithful. Verse 6 adds, "We have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, and to all the people of the land." The nation had ignored God's prophets. Daniel acknowledged God's righteousness. Verse 7 says, "To you, O Lord, belongs righteousness, but to us open shame, as at this day, to the men of Judah, to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and to all Israel, those who are near and those who are far away, in all the lands to which you have driven them, because of the treachery that they have committed against you." God was right to judge them. Verse 8 continues the confession, "To us, O Lord, belongs open shame, to our kings, to our princes, and to our fathers, because we have sinned against you." Every level of society had failed, but God was merciful. Verse 9 says, "To the Lord our God belong mercy and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against him." Despite their rebellion, God remained compassionate. Verse 10 confesses more, "And have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God by walking in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets." They had God's law and chose to ignore it. Verse 11 admits the consequences. "All Israel has transgressed your law and turned aside, refusing to obey your voice. And the curse and oath that are written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have been poured out upon us, because we have sinned against him." The curses Moses warned about had come true. Verse 12 continues, "He has confirmed his words, which he spoke against us and against our rulers who ruled us, by bringing upon us a great calamity. For under the whole heaven there has not been done anything like what has been done against Jerusalem." Jerusalem's destruction fulfilled God's warnings. Verse 13 emphasizes their stubbornness. "As it is written in the law of Moses, all this calamity has come upon us. Yet we have not entreated the favor of the Lord our God, turning from our iniquities and gaining insight by your truth." Even in exile, they hadn't truly repented. Verse 14 acknowledges God's justice. "Therefore the Lord has kept ready the calamity and has brought it upon us. For the Lord our God is righteous in all the works that he has done, and we have not obeyed his voice." And God was right to judge them. Daniel pleaded for mercy. Verse 15 says, "And now, O Lord our God, who brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand, and have made a name for yourself, as at this day we have sinned, we have done wickedly." He appealed to God's past redemption. Verse 16 continues the plea, "O Lord, according to all your righteous acts, let your anger and your wrath turn away from your city Jerusalem, your holy hill, because for our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers, Jerusalem and your people have become a byword among all who are around us." Daniel asked God to restore Jerusalem for his own name's sake. Verse 17 intensifies the prayer. "Now therefore, O our God, listen to the prayer of your servant, and to his pleas for mercy, and for your own sake. O Lord, make your face to shine upon your sanctuary, which is desolate." He prayed for the temple to be restored. Verse 18 appeals to God's character. "O my God, incline your ear and hear, open your eyes and see our desolations, and the city that is called by your name. For we do not present our pleas before you because of our righteousness, but because of your great mercy." They didn't deserve help, but God was merciful. Verse 19 concludes with urgency. "O Lord, hear. O Lord, forgive. O Lord, pay attention and act. Delay not for your own sake, O my God, because your city and your people are called by your name." Daniel pleaded for God to act quickly. While Daniel was still praying, help arrived. Verse 20 of chapter 9 tells us, "While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my plea before the Lord, my God, for the holy hill of my God." He was in the middle of his prayer. Verse 21 continues, "While I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the first, came to me in swift flight at the time of the evening sacrifice. Gabriel, the same angel from the previous vision, flew rapidly to Daniel during the time when the evening sacrifice would have been offered in the temple. Gabriel came with a message. Verse 22 says, "He made me understand, speaking with me and saying, 'O Daniel, I have now come out to give you insight and understanding.'" His purpose was to give Daniel understanding. Verse 23 reveals something beautiful. "At the beginning of your pleas for mercy, a word went out, and I have come to tell it to you, for you are greatly loved. Therefore consider the word and understand the vision." The moment Daniel started praying, God sent the answer. And Gabriel told Daniel he was greatly loved by God. Now came one of the most important prophecies in Scripture. Verse 24 begins, "70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place." 70 weeks or 70 sevens, periods of 7 years totaling 490 years, were determined for Israel and Jerusalem to accomplish 6 things: finish transgression, end sin, atone for iniquity, bring everlasting righteousness, seal up vision and prophecy, and anoint the most holy place. Verse 25 provides specific timing. "Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again, with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. From the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the coming of the Anointed One would be 7 weeks plus 62 weeks, a total of 69 weeks of years, or 483 years. Then Gabriel revealed something tragic. Verse 26 of chapter 9 says, "And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed." After the 483 years, the Anointed One would be killed. Then an army would come and destroy both Jerusalem and the temple. War and desolation would follow. Verse 27 describes the final week. "And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator." Someone would make a covenant for 7 years, but break it halfway through, stopping the sacrifices and setting up something abominable in the temple. This would continue until God's decreed judgment fell on the one causing the desolation. Daniel's final vision came in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Chapter 10, verse 1 introduces it. "In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision." This revelation concerned a great conflict, and Daniel grasped its meaning. But before the vision came, Daniel went through a time of deep mourning. Verse 2 tells us, "In those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. For 21 days Daniel grieved." Verse 3 describes his fast. "I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. He gave up all pleasant food, meat and wine. He didn't even use lotions or oils on his skin." This was serious fasting and mourning. Why was Daniel mourning? The text doesn't say explicitly, but this was during the time when some Jews had returned to rebuild Jerusalem. Perhaps Daniel was grieving over the slow progress, the opposition they faced, or the spiritual condition of the people. Whatever the reason, Daniel devoted himself to prayer and fasting for 3 full weeks. At the end of those 3 weeks, Daniel had an encounter that would change everything. Verse 4 of chapter 10 sets the scene. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is, the Tigris. Daniel was by the river on a specific date. Then he saw something extraordinary. Verse 5 describes the figure. I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. A man dressed in linen with a golden belt appeared before him, but this was no ordinary man. Verse 6 continues the description. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. This being was glorious. His body shone like a precious stone, his face blazed like lightning, his eyes burned like fire, his limbs gleamed like polished bronze, and his voice thundered like a crowd of people. Daniel wasn't alone, but he was the only one who saw the vision. Verse 7 tells us, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. The men with Daniel didn't see anything, but they felt something terrifying and ran away to hide. Daniel was left alone with this overwhelming presence. Verse 8 describes his reaction. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. All his energy drained away. His healthy appearance vanished. He had no strength left. Verse 9 continues, Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep, with my face to the ground. When the being spoke, Daniel collapsed face first into a deep sleep or unconsciousness. Then Daniel felt a touch. Verse 10 of chapter 10 says, And behold, a hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees. A hand lifted Daniel up onto his hands and knees, though he was still shaking. The heavenly messenger spoke to him. Verse 11 records the words, And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. The messenger called Daniel greatly loved and told him to stand up. Daniel obeyed but kept trembling. Then came a stunning revelation. Verse 12 explains, Then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. From the very first day Daniel began praying and fasting 3 weeks earlier, God heard him and sent this messenger. But if the messenger was sent on day 1, why did it take 21 days to arrive? Verse 13 gives the shocking answer, The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. A spiritual being called the Prince of Persia blocked the messenger for 3 weeks. This wasn't a human prince. This was a demonic power assigned to the Persian kingdom. The messenger was stuck in spiritual warfare until Michael the archangel came to help. This verse pulls back the curtain on something we normally don't see. While Daniel was praying on earth, a cosmic battle was raging in the heavenly realm. Evil spiritual forces were fighting to prevent God's message from reaching Daniel. Prayer isn't just about us talking to God. It connects to real spiritual warfare happening in places we can't see. The messenger explained why he came. Verse 14 says, And came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision is for days yet to come. He came to show Daniel what would happen to Israel in the future, but Daniel was overwhelmed again. Verse 15 tells us, When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute. Daniel looked down and couldn't speak. Someone touched Daniel's lips. Verse 16 of chapter 10 says, "And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke. I said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by reason of the vision, pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength." A being who looked like a human touched his mouth, enabling him to speak. Daniel explained he was in pain and had no strength. Verse 17 continues, "How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me." Daniel felt completely drained, barely able to breathe. The being touched him again. Verse 18 says, "Again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me." With each touch, Daniel received more strength. The messenger spoke encouragement. Verse 19 records, "And he said, O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong and of good courage. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me." After being called greatly loved again and receiving peace and strength, Daniel was ready to listen. The messenger had more to say about the spiritual battle. Verse 20 reveals, "Then he said, Do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come." The spiritual warfare wasn't over. After delivering this message, the angel would return to battle the demonic prince of Persia. And after that conflict, another demonic power, the prince of Greece, would rise. But Daniel had a protector. Verse 21 introduces him, "But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these, except Michael, your prince." Michael the archangel was Israel's special defender in the spiritual realm. He stood with the messenger against these dark powers. While earthly kingdoms had demonic princes working behind the scenes, Israel had Michael fighting for them. The messenger then launched into a detailed prophecy about future kings and kingdoms. Chapter 11, verse 2 begins, "And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece." 3 more Persian kings would come, then a 4th who would be extremely wealthy and would provoke conflict with Greece. Verse 3 introduces a mighty king. "Then a mighty king shall arise, who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills." A powerful Greek king would emerge who did whatever he wanted, but his empire wouldn't last. Verse 4 explains, "And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these." His kingdom would be divided 4 ways after his death, but not to his descendants, and none of the parts would match his power. The prophecy then focuses on 2 of these divisions. Verse 5 says, "Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority." The king of the south would be strong, but one of his commanders would become even stronger. Verse 6 describes an attempted alliance. "After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times." A marriage alliance would be arranged, but it would fail tragically. The prophecy continues with intricate details about conflicts between the king of the north and the king of the south. Verse 7 tells of revenge. "And from a branch from her roots one shall arise in his place. He shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail." Someone from the murdered woman's family would attack the northern kingdom successfully. These detailed predictions continue through many verses, describing wars, alliances, betrayals, and power struggles between these 2 kingdoms over many generations. The specificity is remarkable. These prophecies were so precise that critics have claimed they must have been written after the events because no one could predict such details. But that's exactly the point. Only God knows the future with such accuracy. Then the prophecy shifts to a particularly evil ruler. Verse 21 of chapter 11 introduces him. In his place shall arise a contemptible person, to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. This despised person would seize power through deception and flattery, not through legitimate succession. Verse 22 describes his rise. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. He would destroy armies and even break a covenant with a religious leader. This king would be treacherous. Verse 23 says, And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. He would make agreements only to betray them. Verse 24 continues, Without warning he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. He would accomplish things his ancestors never did, but his success would be temporary. The prophecy describes multiple campaigns and conflicts. Eventually, this king would turn his rage toward God's people and their worship. Verse 30 explains a key turning point. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged, and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. After being threatened by Western ships, he would vent his fury on Israel and find allies among those who abandoned their faith. Verse 31 describes his ultimate blasphemy. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. His forces would desecrate the temple, stop the daily sacrifices, and set up something abominable in God's holy place. Verse 32 shows how he would work. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. He would corrupt those willing to compromise, but faithful believers would resist. This king would exalt himself above all gods. Verse 36 says, And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper till the indignation is accomplished, for what is decreed shall be done. He would blaspheme the true God and succeed until God's appointed time of judgment. Verse 37 adds, He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. This king would reject all religions, even his own heritage, and worship only himself. The prophecy then jumps to the end times. Chapter 12, verse 1 introduces this final period. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Michael would stand up for Israel during the worst time in history, but God's people, those whose names were in the book, would be rescued. This time of trouble would be unlike anything the world had ever seen. No previous persecution, war, or disaster would compare. Yet even in that darkest hour, God would protect those who belonged to him. Then came a promise that had never been stated this clearly before. Verse 2 of chapter 12 reveals, And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. The dead would rise. Some would wake to eternal life, others to eternal judgment. This is one of the clearest Old Testament statements about resurrection and the afterlife. Verse 3 describes the reward of the faithful. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. The righteous would shine with glory. Those who led others to God would shine like stars eternally. The angel gave Daniel a command. Verse 4 says, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Daniel was to preserve this prophecy for the future. In the end times, people would travel everywhere, and knowledge would expand rapidly. Daniel then saw two other figures. Verse 5 tells us, "Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and one on that bank of the stream. Two beings stood on opposite sides of the river. One of them asked a question." Verse 6 records it, "And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, 'How long shall it be till the end of these wonders?'" The glorious man from earlier was now above the water, and someone asked him how long until these events would be fulfilled. The answer came with a solemn oath. Verse 7 says, "And I heard the man clothed in linen who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. He raised both hands and swore by the eternal God that it would last for 3.5 years and would end when the power of God's people was completely broken." Daniel heard but didn't understand. Verse 8 admits, "I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, 'O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things?'" He asked for clarification about how it would all end. But the angel wouldn't say more. Verse 9 responds, he said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end." The full meaning was sealed until the appointed time. The angel did offer some final information. Verse 10 explains, "Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. And none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand." During these events, the righteous would be purified, while the wicked would remain evil. The wicked wouldn't understand what was happening, but the wise would. Then came specific time markers. Verse 11 says, "And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. From the stopping of the sacrifices and the setting up of the abomination would be 1,290 days." Verse 12 adds another time frame. "Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1,335 days. Those who endured until 1,335 days would be blessed." The book ends with a personal word to Daniel. Verse 13 concludes, "But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days." Daniel was to live his life faithfully until death. Then he would rest and rise again at the resurrection to receive his inheritance. If this journey through Daniel's life has impacted you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next biblical deep dive. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Daniel's story, maybe someone facing their own fiery furnace or lion's den, and drop a comment below telling us which part of Daniel's story resonated with you the most. Remember, the same God who shut the lions' mouths for Daniel is still God today. The same God who gave Daniel favor in Babylon can give you favor where you are. The same God who revealed mysteries to Daniel wants to guide your life too. Thanks for watching, stay faithful, and we'll see you in the next video.